everybody. This is my very first official doing a poet interview, which I am so thrilled because I get to meet all the people that I've worked with. My first guest tonight, or today, I don't know when you're actually going to watch this, so is Marjorie Maddox. She is a professor of English and creative writing at Lock Haven University, and she's published 11 collections of poetry. She's a co-editor with Jerry Wemple on the Commonwealth Contemporary Poets on Pennsylvania from Penn State Press in 2005. And she's an assistant editor of Presence, has several children's books, including 2 from Boyd's Mills Press, A Crossing of Zebras, Animal Paxton Poetry, and Rules of the Game, Baseball Poems, as well as Inside Out Poems on Writing and Reading Poems with Insider Exercises, that was a tongue twister, which was a finalist for the International Book Award in Children's Education, as well as I'm Feeling Blue Too, a 2021 NCTE Notable Book of Poetry. She has also published children's poetry in such anthologies as Paul Janitsenko. Did I say that right?
Janesco, yeah.
Okay, Janesco. Sorry about that, Paul, wherever you are. Hey You, Poems to Skyscrapers, Mosquitoes, and Other Fun Things. Janet Wong's and Sylvia Vardell's Hop to It, and The Proper Way to Meet a Hedgehog, and Other How-To Poems. Wow, that's a nice collection of things that you've done. But you've also been a national judge, I saw, for the Lee Bennett Hopkins Children's Poetry Book of the Year. That's an honor. And also chairing a jury of the judges for the same award. Very good. But there's even more to your credit, actually. So listeners, I would send you to our website, marjoriemaddox.com, and that will give you even more insight into who Marjorie actually is. So to start with, we got involved back in June of 2020. I think it was when you sent your submission in for the short of it. And for anybody who doesn't know who the short of it is, that's me. I created this online magazine because I wanted to showcase beautiful, short, and succinct poetry that I had read. And I felt like these people weren't getting enough attention. So I wanted to put them on my blog and show everybody, look, beautiful poetry, and it's short and sweet, succinct, and it's in 150 words or fewer. So I wanted to put that out there. I got people coming in. Marjorie was one of them, or one of the first of them. And so we published and featured her work back in, let's see, it looks like September. And I'll include the link at the bottom too of the video so everybody can go directly to it. But her poem was featured in September. And here we are today after I've produced the first anthology, which is not live yet, but it will be very shortly. More news to come. If you're interested, please go to the short of it, link in the bottom, and then get on my mailing list, and I can let you know everything that's going on with the anthology. But let's get started, Marjorie. You and I are close in age, and I'm curious about what the world looks like to you right now. How does it affect you, and specifically, how does it affect your writing?
Oh, well, some days that's kind of complicated. I am teaching all online right now. I'm a professor at a state university. So many of my days are filled with online Zoom classes. And I've been doing that since last March when we kind of went remote in the middle of the semester. But I also have been getting a fair amount of writing done, kind of in bits and pieces. Typically during the school year, I don't get much writing done at all. I'm always writing in the back of my head, so I still produce a lot, but I get it done in the winter break and the summer break. But now I'm not driving back and forth 40 minutes to the university. And I have a little more flexibility, even though all my classes are on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So I'm very busy on those days, but I have some flexibility on the other days. So every once in a while I sneak a little bit in. So I've been writing some poems about what we're going through now. And kind of that's also a way to cope a little bit, I think.
Absolutely. I would agree with you 100%. I feel like that a lot of the things that I publish sometimes are more about things I've dealt with and processed primarily. But I think even as we endure certain things as they come at you, you have to deal with them like maybe right on the spot. So I can definitely see and understand what you're saying there. Okay. Tell us a little bit about your journey with writing. Obviously, you've had an extensive career so far, from what I can see. How did it start? Did you end up where you thought you would? And what are you working on right now?
Oh boy. Well, I was very fortunate to grow up in a family that valued the arts. Um, my father, my father had a lot of heart issues, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But he had to retire early from his dental practice, and he became a photographer. So I had that kind of in my background. My aunt was an artist, a painter. My mother loved to read. And
Mhm.
so when I was little, she would type up, my books, my poems, and make them into books and type up my stories. So I was taught kind of at an early age that the arts were something to be valued. So that was a real gift to me, I think. So I always kind of wanted to write. I always enjoyed writing when I was a kid. I took classes when I was in college. I went on to get a master's in English and creative writing at the University of Louisville, and then I got a fellowship to go to Cornell to study poetry writing. So, and I've just kind of kept going. I write poetry, fiction, creative nonfiction, children's literature. I like to kind of shake it up a little bit. So it helps for me to kind of switch genres and gives me a new perspective on things. And then I'll come back. Probably poetry is my first love.
Yeah, I have to say I feel like that's the same thing with me. One thing I wanted to note on what you just said, though, you had a lot of encouragement early on. I think that makes a big difference too, how soon you get started in your journey. But I also wanted to ask you, that picture in the background, did you do that? Or is that
No, that is my daughter who is an artist. And I kind of snatched it from her room. I'm right now in my son's room. He's off to college. He's graduating from college this year.
mm,
And but I wanted something beautiful in the background. And I tell you, I get lots of comments on that painting. She does lots of large, very kind of the opposite of the short of it, right?
yeah,
Lots of very large paintings. But people always notice it, it grabs their attention. So
it definitely, I mean, just from what I can see, it looks dark and mysterious, but I feel like there's definitely a story there. And the colors and the tone of it is very interesting. So I was definitely drawn to it when I got on screen with you.
I will let her know.
Yeah, definitely. Please tell her she's definitely talented. Um, Now, you've written, obviously, I mentioned a long list already of all the books that you have written, and your first one was in 1995. With things being so easy to self-publish now, what was the process back then, and what do you do now? I guess now that you're a seasoned writer and published author, do you rely more on people doing it for you, or would you consider self-publishing?
Well, that first book actually was not self-published. I don't have any self-published books,
Oh,
but that was a book that won the Sandstone Poetry Book Award, judged by Leon Stokesbury. But it was a small press. They had it, I think they made 500 copies, and after under a year, they went out of print. They went out of business. And
oh,
so I had won this big award that I had been all excited about, my very first book. And then all of a sudden the press was no more. So Amazon does have a program called Back in Print. So they just take books that have been previously published by a reputable press,
mhm.
and then they can go ahead and they make like an ebook out of it. Um,
Excellent. Well,
so
that's
that was
good.
kind of a different experience. Yeah.
Well, I'm always hoping somehow that I've self-published everything, but I've always hoped that maybe a big publisher will read something of mine and go, "Oh, I want to publish that." So maybe,
More and more these days, sometimes that's a really good option.
mm,
So, it's a lot different than it used to be.
yeah, I'll keep my fingers crossed. We'll see. But in the meantime, I think self-publishing is probably by far the easiest way to go. And I'm not saying that it's easy for anybody who has published a book. Either way, whether it's going through a publisher or going, solo, there's a lot of work involved. And if you're
A
not
lot.
willing to dedicate the time and the effort to it, it's not going to go anywhere, in my opinion. But, I'm sure you can speak to
It-
that too.
No, it's definitely kind of a full-time job, just sending things out. writing is you have one hat on, but then there's this whole business side of writing that you have to put this other hat on, and sending things out, and particularly um, those of us who may be more introverted, it can be difficult to do that kind of self-promotion. I mean,
Right.
I've gotten more used to that, but it's hard. Like, I love getting readings. I love standing up when you have it down on paper and reading.
Mhm.
Um, but like, I avoided taking speech classes when I was a kid because those kind of things terrified me. And yet I ended up being a teacher. But being a teacher is different. It's more like a relationship. You develop a rapport as opposed to, kind of
That's
giving a
interesting
paper
that you
speech.
said that, because it brought me back to, and I've always had a big love for words. So for me, it was English was a natural, and literature specifically. I got a lot of joy out of that class. And I remember doing book reports. I loved book reports. They were fun. Not only did you get to read a book that you might like, or even if you didn't like it, and then just to critique it and to identify with the plot and the theme and everything, the characters, and just get into the story and then write about it. That was awesome, in my opinion. So I feel like that was where I got started, but I didn't rediscover that until like my 40s, that love. And that's why I think I finally figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up, which was
Well,
cool.
I do think that teaching, especially teaching writing or teaching literature, is a nice companion in some ways to writing.
Mhm.
I do have a very heavy teaching load, so it would be nicer if I didn't have such a heavy teaching load. So many stacks of essays to grade, but to get up and talk about literature, it sparks other ideas for your own writing. And
Mhm.
again, even if you're not writing about it right then, because you don't have that kind of bigger spaces of time, it's still, in the head. In
Right.
fact, one of my books, I have a stack here. This one, True, False, None of the Above, is
Mhm.
really about my response to teaching, responses to different literary text,
Mhm.
that I had written kind of over the years. And sometimes, things that I was teaching right that semester that I thought, oh yeah, that's really intriguing. Maybe a student said something really brilliant or really insightful, and then it started kind of germinating
Ruminating
in
in
my
the
head.
back of your brain. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. Let's see. What have you found to be the hardest thing about writing? And on the flip side of that, what's the easiest thing for you?
Well, I don't think writer's block ever goes away. Staring at that blank page or that blank screen. I think we all, deal with that kind of over and over again. And
Mhm.
especially if it's been a while since you've had a chance to write. Once I start going, I'm usually okay because I've given myself permission to write a bunch of bad poems before I get to the good ones. But sometimes even getting that bad one out, when there's a blank screen is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard work. And then, and I may be going along with that, the hard work of sending stuff out. And, I've tried getting agents. I've tried, there's some books that I've sent out for 10 or 12 years. And the one I was even telling you about, I'm Feeling Blue, that just, got this nice recognition from NCTE. I'd sent it out for a long time, and it's hard not to get discouraged, but just to be persistent. And the best part, I guess, is when things click, and suddenly things come together and you have that aha moment, and you can tell it's, I don't know, that's what kind of keeps you addicted, is when things kind of come together and it makes sense. It clicks into
Yeah,
place.
absolutely. I think we all that gives you more spark, I think, to keep
Mhm.
pursuing it. I had a question though, when you say to find an agent, do you have an agent?
No, I don't. And I mean, I think it's pretty impossible unless you're a huge, name to get an agent in poetry. Um, and I had an agent for a little while with my fiction. I have a collection of short stories, but the guy never wrote me back ever, so
Oh,
so that that didn't work out too well. And but I've been trying to get an agent with children's literature, which would be helpful because a lot of places won't look at your manuscripts until you have an agent. So I think it's different with prose than it is with poetry. With poetry, I don't know if it would really help, or if yeah, or people really use an agent very often, but it would be helpful in the other areas, I think.
And that sparked another question with regards to children's books too. When you shop those around to publishers, do they require that you have to provide illustrations too, or is that something that a service that they would like if they see a story, if they get the manuscript and they really like it, will they make, will they go ahead and get an illustrator for it? How does that process work?
Well, I've heard two completely different responses to that. I've heard some publishers who definitely don't want you to send the illustrations. They have some of them have in-house illustrators, or they have people that they like, and others really like that idea. Um, my one of my first children's books, and this I'll show you these two. So, Crossing of Zebras, Animal Packs and Poetry,
Love
and then also this new one. I'm Feeling Blue Too. These were both done with one of a colleague of mine, and we did them a little bit differently because he had already done the illustrations. He had been working on the books for a while, and he said, "Hey, can you help me out with this?" And so with the Crossing of Zebras, he had done a few rhymes, and he wanted me to kind of help out. And the book is all about uh, phrases like a school of fish,
Mhm.
okay, collective nouns for groups of animals. And he has these wonderful illustrations that are like those pen and ink drawings you do when you're a kid, with crayon and you scratch
Mhm.
some of them off. So he had done most of those, and he wanted me to do the verse, and I did a few, and he said, you just finish them. So it was a lot of fun. So it was kind of an exercise for me because I had to look at his illustrations
Mhm.
and then come up with the kind of a mini story
Mhm.
um, for each illustration. And then I'm Feeling Blue Too. These are both illustrated by Philip Huber. He
Mhm.
started the book when he was in college, and he just retired. So that's how long he was working on the book, but
Ah.
he asked me to write the story behind it. And so it's a poetic story, but there is more of an overarching, narrative to that
Mhm.
book as opposed to individual poems with the Crossing of Zebras. And that one's all about the color blue. So I had to look at the illustrations and figure out, okay, what's the storyline here? And how can I follow this little boy with his dog Blue as they discover all these places that blue crops up across the world? And then it also plays up the idea of blue and depression and kind of getting out and exploring the rest of the world to kind of get out of yourself a little bit. So
Excellent. I like the topic of that one. I'm going to have to probably, I feel bad, but I don't have any one of your books yet.
well,
But,
there's no reason you should.
but I mean, because this
I
is,
mean, you should now, but there's no
I
reason you
should,
should before.
absolutely. I was like, the covers of some of those are beautiful. So I'm really looking forward to
He
spending
is
some time
very,
with
very
those.
talented.
Yeah.
But that was a little bit different because we did submit then together, because you know he had come up with the whole idea and done the illustrations first, and so then and usually it's the other way around, the words come first. So
Well, not always. It's weird. I don't know about your process, but for me, it's like I read something, I think about something, and then I write something. And it could be something I wrote, read. It could be something that I read from somebody else, whatever. But I still feel like the um, the drive to complete it doesn't really happen until I have that inspiration. But I don't know what that inspiration could be.
mm,
It could be a title. It could be a visual because I love the prompts. You see me doing those every week. I love Eugenia and VJ and Sajay and oh my gosh, the short stories and who's the other one? Now I'm gonna blank and I'm gonna feel bad because I read them every week. Oh, the Sunday Whirl with doing the Wordle. So those it just depends. It depends on what sparks you, and I love that process of it. That's probably my favorite part about writing is being inspired and how it actually happens. So I enjoy that. But
yeah, I agree with you. And there's all kinds of places that you can find inspiration, even if it's just like the headlines of the news, or you could probably write something about a phone book, although I guess we don't really have phone books too much anymore. So maybe inspired by the fact that we don't have phone books anymore. So.
Well, it was Lisa said to me the other day, there's a poem in something, and now I can't remember what it was, but she's right. There's a poem in everything too. One really off weird one that I wrote one time was about spider in the drain. So yeah,
Oh,
it could be anything.
yeah.
But the reason we got together is because we wanted to showcase, obviously, all the poets on whoever wanted to participate in this venue, to showcase our poets and for people to get to know the authors and the writers better than just the written word. So I'm really glad we had the opportunity to do this, but I would also like you to read the poem that you wanted to read. It's called "The Day I'm Supposed to Read Poems on Blizzards, a Blizzard Arrives." So I'm gonna, with that, I'm gonna turn it back over to you, and then I'm going to screenshot, and I'm trying to do it the way Lisa did it. I don't want the whole screen to be taken up, but I think I might. So if that's the case, my apologies, because you don't
No,
want
no,
to.
we're still on the side there.
Excellent. Okay, good.
Okay, great. Okay, maybe two little bits of information that might help you with this poem as background. One, I've written quite a bit about my father who had an unsuccessful heart transplant. He had his first heart attack when he was 38. He lived until the age of 65, and he received his heart during the blizzard of 93, which just really shut down everything in my part of the country. I was in Ohio visiting my family. I heard news about the blizzard, and I rushed home so I would avoid the blizzard. A man died in a car accident. My father got his heart, but I couldn't get back at all because everything was completely shut down for days. You couldn't get on the highway. So that's one thing that might be helpful to know. Another thing is that I'm really bad at saying no because I often like to take advantage of all kinds of opportunities. So I was scheduled to give a reading at a local library, and a blizzard hit. And I really had this struggle. I hate driving in snow, I think partly because of the situation with my father. But I really had this kind of struggle about, should I go out or should I not go out? And I'm sure nobody would have shown up anyways in the blizzard to the library, but I had kind of given my word, so it was hard for me to call and say no. Okay, so here's the poem. The day I'm supposed to read poems on blizzards, a blizzard arrives. And it whirls me up into white, pages twirling out and away, cold the stranger in the front row I owe an ode to, when all I have are ballads on blizzards, like the one that uncovered for my father a stranger's still pulsing pump in a pile of wrecked cars. Yes, that one, plus other assorted disasters of the heart and will which, piled up these weather-stricken days, did, I confess to sleet, give me the survivor's desire to not careen down the blank highway, past ditches and near misses, to read to an audience of no one, everyone else with a backbone of sense, sensibility, hunkering down, as I did, after all, here by my electric fire, typing ice. And I do have an electric fire. I one of the criteria I had for when we moved into our home was that we had have a fireplace, and we do have a fireplace, but it's actually colder when we build a fire. So on those other days, I have a little electric fireplace. It looks like a fireplace that I
Mhm.
plug in. So
Awesome. I love that one. And it's obvious why it made the book. So thank you for taking the time to do that. And I have one last question for you. I think I've informed all the poets and writers that we will be reopening the short of it for submissions July 1st. So will you be submitting work this time, please?
I will certainly try. And if I don't have anything, I'm going to tell myself that I'll try to write something. So great.
I
Thank you so much
hope
for everything you do.
Oh, believe me, it's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I love reading. Again, the reason that this whole thing even started is because I found my niche. I love short, succinct poetry. And then when I saw that there was such a volume out there of good writers and poets with good material, but and I'm not saying that everybody is in that situation, obviously, but there were so many that I had seen that were not getting noticed. And I thought to myself, I want to be that platform. So that's how it came about. Once it came about, then the idea for the anthology to do the best of the best. And I love it because it's been fun reading it. It's been fun editing, not editing the work, but, creating the features for everybody and picking the images to go along with their work. That's been the fun part. I've really enjoyed it. And then just to pick everybody out for the anthology to really, the ones that nailed the heart, kind of, in my opinion. But so I've enjoyed the process, and I'm looking forward to doing this. I can't commit to doing this every year. That's why I figured I'd do 1 year, um, showcasing. Then the next year would be the anthology, and then showcasing anthology, and so on, and to ad nauseum till whenever, whenever I finally, expire. But anyway, so it's been fun. And I'm
Well,
really
thank
glad
you
that
so
you came
much.
with me on this journey, and everybody for that matter. So we'll look forward to 2022 and do it again.
Yes, yes.
Awesome.
Wonderful.